My name's Jonathan. I'm one of the founders of Clever Tiny Homes. We're a pretty good sized tiny home manufacturer. Just to give you a sense, we're about a 150 person company. We're a little bit different in that we do a very limited number of models, and we do it in a very specific way. So we spend a lot of time designing how we do things in each model, and spend a lot of time thinking about these questions and trying to design to really optimize for these kinds of things. So that's what we do as a company. We've shipped almost 200 homes in the last 18 months all over the country. So we've dealt with a lot of homes in a lot of different locations. I'm also on the board of the Tiny House Industry Association, which is an association that promotes getting these tiny homes permitted and legal and trying to reduce the cost of that. So I know quite a lot of it about that. So what they asked me to talk about today was a couple of things. One was talking a little bit about how we think about building and designing tiny homes, how we make small spaces feel not so small, and how we build small homes that last a long time. That's a lot of what we focus on from a product and engineering perspective. Let me dive into this real quick, and then definitely I enjoy answering questions, as you can tell. So just pop up with any questions that you have as we're talking. I'm going to start with some design and engineering, just real quick. So 10 principles to consider. We'll switch between engineering or construction and design details. So the first one in the engineering side of things or construction side is we believe to do fully roughed-in plumbing. So you can build homes where the plumbing's kind of hanging out the bottom, and that is a way to build. We really think it makes sense to have all that plumbing inside the home because it prevents points of egress where bugs and termites and water and all kinds of things can make their way in. And so the home ultimately lasts longer if everything is fully roughed in, meaning it's all inside the building envelope and the building envelope is really well sealed. So that's one of our construction principles. It also, if you're in a cold weather environment, means the pipes don't freeze because it's inside the building envelope and the insulation. So fully roughed-in plumbing. When we talk about design, I'm going to switch between engineering and design. One of the design principles we have for small residential units, for smaller things, is we talk about balancing efficiency with pleasure. What do we mean about that? There is often a tendency when people are designing smaller things is just to make everything smaller. Oh, I only have 220 square feet. I'm going to make everything as, I'm going to have all the things in a house, but make it as small as, make them all smaller, a smaller toilet, a smaller fridge, and stuff like that. What we found works really well, and again, different ways to do it, this is our perspective, is that you really want to think about what are the parts of the house you're going to use every day, and what are the parts of the house that you enjoy using, right? For us and a lot of our customers, everyone takes a shower or bath every day. Maybe you don't, but most people do. It's recommended, your choice. But anyhow, a lot of folks take a shower or bath every day. And so we put in full-size showers because for us, that's a worthwhile use of that limited square space so that however long you're spending, you're having a comfortable experience. You're not in a small shower. So we found that works really well. I'll give you some other examples here. Kitchens, if you're cooking every day, you want to have enough space that you can cut your vegetables and prepare your meat and cook something and have it and wash your dishes and have that kind of space. Similar with beds, what matters in terms of when you're in bed, are you okay having a low ceiling height or do you want that higher ceiling height? What size bed do you want? Do you need a bed that's above ground or more, mattress that's on the ground? So you want to think about those ideas of what are the parts of the house that bring you pleasure and balance that with the desire to make everything super small and efficient. So that's a design thing. Next slide. There we go. Okay, back to an engineering thing. We think it makes sense to put a thermal break between the trailer and the interior. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the engineering differences between a tiny house on wheels and a normal home is that you're building on a trailer chassis. And a trailer chassis is a giant piece of metal. And metal holds temperature. So if it's really hot outside, the metal will warm up, it'll get hot, and it's gonna hold that. Or if it's cold, it's gonna hold that. And if you put your subfloor right on that trailer chassis, in other words, if you treat it like it's the foundation, that heat or cool is going to transfer right into the home. And in fact, I've run calculations on this, and building right on a trailer chassis, you basically might as well not have insulation, because you can insulate the walls as well as you want, but you're putting all this heat and cool directly in. So we think it's really important that you have a thermal break between the interior of the house and the exterior. A thermal break is a construction terminology that basically means anywhere in your interior has insulation between it and the exterior, right? And so we think a lot about that, but it's something to consider whether you're building your own or buying one. Is how is that metal chassis that's tiny house on wheels being dealt with in terms of its interaction with the rest of the structure? Next slide. Okay, design, back to design thing. Another design principle we use is this idea of multifunctional spaces. What do we mean by that? Well, if you think about living in a house, there's spaces you're going to use every day. And then there's ways you're going to use the house that's not every day, right? You're going to host a party. You're going to have people over. For most of us, we're not hosting parties every day. Maybe some people are, but different use case. And so how do you make the space change? And so we like to have the space be able to change for different uses because we have that limited space. So an example of that is in our Clever S, which we have here, our studio, we have a Murphy bed. Most of our customers keep that bed down during everyday living, but then they can pop it up when they have friends over so you have more space. Or in our one bedroom, we have a movable island in the kitchen, which allows that island, the kitchen, to become a big kitchen where you can cook with a lot of people, or a smaller kitchen where you have a lot of space for other things in the home. So you kind of evolve those spaces to different use cases. And we think that's a good way, particularly if we have smaller square footage in a tiny home, to have efficient use of space by allowing that space to change its use case. All right, this is one I'm very passionate about. Actually, all these are, but this is a really important one, is when you're building a tiny home, you have to think about how you're managing water on the wall. Why does that matter? Most houses that are built in California have eaves. You have a roof, and then the roof is going to extend beyond the wall for a foot or two. That is changing because of fires, but this is how most people think about building. That eave acts as an umbrella, literally. So when it rains, it's stopping most of the water from hitting the wall. In tiny homes, or any really factory-built housing, because we're transporting it, we tend not to build eaves. We tend to have very, very small eaves. But what that means practically is that your wall is going to have a lot, and your windows are going to have a lot more water hitting it than in normal homes. And you have to plan for that. So how do we plan for that? Well, it ends up that there are building codes for that. And in fact, what we look to is Oregon. Oregon building codes are extensive for water, because they basically assume it's raining 360 days a year, and you've got to do a lot of rain. And so they have good things in that. Key things there is a drainage layer between your weatherproof barrier and your siding. So most of the homes built in California, you have your siding and it goes right onto your weatherproof barrier and your sheathing. The problem with that is that if water penetrates the siding, it doesn't drain out. It cools and then it goes through the wall and it ends up mold and stuff like that. So you want to put some kind of drainage layer. There's ways to do it, like we have there with furring strips. There's new products like Crinkle Wrap is a new product that basically kind of creates a mesh drainage layer that allows it out. I think that's really important because you have a lot more water on the walls. The other thing is flashing windows. Windows should have metal flashing. Now when the water comes down, a metal flashing will push the water out and away from the window, right? So whether you're building or looking at a home, look at the window and see there's that metal flashing, because windows are a major point of egress for water in a wall, particularly if water is hitting that. And so we have ways of pushing it out, and flashing is a key way. All right, next slide. There we go. Okay, back to a design thing. Another design principle we really try to embrace is simplifying the interior. And let me explain what that means. If you're in a 3,000 square foot house or 2,000 square foot house and you're standing in a room, normally what's in your eyesight is that room plus maybe one other room. If you're in a bedroom and the door's open, you're maybe looking at the hallway. If you're in the kitchen, you're maybe looking at the dining room. You're generally seeing one or two rooms at a time. In a tiny home, a smaller home, if you're standing where you're often seeing the whole home at once, right? And you're seeing it all. And what that means is that there's a lot more going on, just a function of what you're seeing. You're seeing the kitchen with the appliances, you're seeing parts of the bathroom, you're seeing multiple doors, you're seeing the bed, all these things are going on. And so just by function, you have a lot more happening. And so we then really think to balance that, you really want to think about how do you simplify the design of the rest of it to do that. We tend not to, and everyone has different styles. Again, this is personal preference. But we really believe that as you do less decorative kind of items, and focus more on materials, which I'll talk about, and keep things nice and clean, it actually makes the home feel bigger because you have less stuff going on. We tend to associate clutter with claustrophobia or smaller, and it makes a home feel smaller. So if you want to make a home feel bigger, you need to simplify what you see at a single point in time. Okay, design faction engineering thing. Another thing we really believe in is getting a nice building envelope and air sealing the home. Why does that matter? The reason it matters is that for a tiny home, you have a lot more wall than you have floor space compared to like a 3,000 square foot home. And so you can put a lot of insulation in it, but if air is coming through that wall, that insulation is not going to do a lot of good. So we often get asked like, oh, what's your R value? But R value, particularly in a small home, is only part of the equation. If you have big holes in the home, tons of air is going to come in. You can put all the insulation you want, and you're still just going to have a home that's not energy efficient. So we really think about how do we seal the home well and try to minimize air leakage into it. So that's another one of the things. And again, these are things that we think are important. People to agree. There's different ways to build. This is just sharing kind of things that we focus on. Next. All right. So to the design thing, another one of our principles is prioritizing materials over decoration. So the last slide I talked about, simplifying the interior. And so trying to get rid of decorative elements because it adds clutter, but you just still want design and you still want to style the home in the style that you're going for, right? We exclusively do modern homes, but other folks are doing cabins or, different styles of homes. And the way to achieve that is to use materials. Because as humans, we're really attuned to materials. And if you use materials in the right way, you can speak to a design language and speak to a design intent without having a lot of extra decorative things in the home. And so we really, again, we do contemporary design, but we really think a lot about what is the materials that we have in the home and what story does that tell, both from a durability perspective, but also from a design and aesthetic perspective as well. So kind of building on the last engineering thing, the other thing that we think is important in small spaces is proper ventilation. And there's a number of ways to ventilate homes. And if you're sealing something well, particularly if it's small, as someone's living in it, your CO2 levels are going to rise quite quickly, and you're going to have issues with off-gassing and stuff like that. So you need to find a way to get the air out. There's a very cool technology called energy recovery ventilators, or heat recovery ventilators, that a lot of people don't know about. That's a super, super efficient way to blow stale air out of your home and bring fresh air in. So we put these on our homes because it allows you to constantly have fresh air coming in, but not lose the energy. So the way these works is it goes through a heat exchanger. So the air conditioned air actually passes, and it's about 92% efficient, that cooling to the new air coming in. So you constantly can bring new air in, but it's not, if you're in Sacramento, it's not 100-degree air that's coming in. It's kind of pre-cooled. This is a very cool technology that is, I think, growing in adoption. We put it in all our homes. And yeah, it really changes that feeling of that home to constantly have that fresh air, but obviously not bringing fresh air in. So going back to design and building on that material idea, another thing that we think a lot about is not just how it looks, but the other senses as well, right? So there's a reason we put this slide after talking about air ventilation and ERVs, because smell is a part of our senses and how we perceive the environments in, right? So if you can have that smell feel good, that's going to really enhance the feeling of spaciousness in the house, right? If you have a small house that has high CO2 levels, it's going to feel like a small house. If you have a small house that feels like it has fresh air in it, it's going to feel really, really different. And you're not going to notice that change in size. So we think about, how it feels from touch is another thing. Designers, and again, I'm not a designer. You probably could tell that by looking at me, but my partner is, and she always talks about, like, as architects and designers, we often always think about how it looks and forget about how stuff feels. And that's part of the senses, is we're interacting with a house. How does the countertop feel? How do the walls feel? Like, we're multi-sensory beings. Another aspect, another advantage of thinking about the building envelope is how well sealed the home is. How does it sound? And what do you hear? So we always want to think about, I think, if you're building houses, and it becomes more important as you build small houses where everything's happening in a small space, all the senses and how we design for all the senses. To the next subject, where can you put a tiny house? In particular, here I'm talking about a tiny house on wheels, not an ADU on foundation, which a number of us, the companies building tiny homes, do both on wheels and on foundation. But I'm going to talk about on wheels, because on wheels is, in many cases, a more cost-effective way to do it, and it's a question we often get. So this is not an exhaustive list. It is unfortunately a topic of endless complexity, because every place is different, and myself and other companies here will help you, walk through that and talk about it, and consult you on it. So this is a high-level overview to kind of give you a lay of the land. That's hopefully helpful, but by no means exhaustive. I want to be clear about that. So we tend to kind of categorize areas you can put a tiny home on wheels into 3 categories. One is tiny home or RV parks. These are usually certified as park model RVs or RVs. So you can put them legally in RV parks, generally speaking, or there's some wonderful tiny home parks. I'll talk more about that. There are areas, wonderful areas, that the Tiny House Industry Association has worked on that allow, and others, including a group in there, that allow you to permit a tiny home or an RV as an ADU or as a primary dwelling. I'll talk about that. That's very exciting. And then there's a number of areas that we call kind of minimal alternate zoning, where it's a little more of a gray area, and you can get away with it. I'll talk more about that. But let's go into each of those in more detail. So tiny home RV parks, in many ways, this is the most straightforward. These are areas that are permitted and entitled and designed to put tiny homes or RVs. A couple popular ones that are not really near here, but in Northern California, Tiny Tranquility, which is where that picture is a beautiful, it's a set of 2 parks up in the Oregon-California border. Really wonderful people that run that, and I think there's homes from all the builders here up there probably. So you got Tiny Tranquility in the Redwoods there. There's a growing one, Blue Lakes in Lake County. A guy named Jonathan who runs that, and a few others around here. But those are 2 that I know are actively looking for new tenants.
Park Delta Bay.
Park Delta Bay. Are they still looking for tenants, or they are? Okay. Park Delta Bay in Delta Bay in the Bay. Ileton. Yeah, they are another one that's around here. So that's a quote easy place to put it. And I'll also say there are RV parks. Like, there's a customer of ours who's at the show in the home there, who has one of our homes in a RV park in Placerville. She's the only tiny home there, but once hers came in, now they're like, great, we want all tiny homes here, right? So they're trying to get more tiny homes in that park. That's up in Placerville. So we see that a lot, is like, once an RV park sees an initial tiny comes in, they get really excited, because they're like, this is nice. This is better than the RVs that we have. Okay, now we get to areas that have specific tiny home / park model RV ordinances. This is specific, unfortunately, to every jurisdiction. So people are like, I'm in California, what can I do? Nothing, because the state of California doesn't set these laws. It's the local jurisdiction, and there's a million jurisdictions across the US. But broadly speaking, Oregon, California, Maine, and Colorado have some of the leading laws in this area. I'll talk mostly about California, but I want to mention the others that are there in different areas. We'll go to the next slide here. There's a number of areas that have tiny home specific ordinances that allow tiny homes either as permanent as an ADU or as a primary. Placer County is great. One of the areas you can do that in the county of Placer, not the city. Placer County. Nevada County is another one. They can do that. And West Sacramento is another place. And the people responsible for West Sacramento are just inside there passing that ordinance. So those are some of the local areas. There's other areas. That home that's being craned in is in LA City. Believe it or not, LA City. You can permit it. That home is permanent in LA City. San Diego City, Santa Cruz. You can see the list there. So those are places that you can permanent tiny house on wheels. If you're trying to put it as an ADU in like Sacramento County, you cannot put a tiny house on wheels. It has to be on a foundation or permitted as a on foundation. The question was, are these counties or cities? And it's both. And you're wondering why. So in housing law in the United States, we have this concept called the authority having jurisdiction. And it's basically what is the most local unit of government that controls housing laws. So in some places it's the counties, in some places it's the cities. And so it depends basically where it is. Generally speaking, if you're in an unincorporated part of the county, it's the county. If you're in the city, so in Sacramento, the city of Sacramento controls housing laws in the city of Sacramento. In the unincorporated counties like Carmichael or Fair Oaks, it's the county of Sacramento. So that's how it works. The authority having jurisdiction. Yeah. Right, next. Any questions out there? Yeah.
What's the widest width guys built?
What's the widest width we built? I'll answer what we built, and then I'll give you kind of an overview of tiny homes and things. So we make 8.5 and we make 12 feet wide. The 12-foot wide, which is our clever one, is our most popular unit. If you're wondering why those dimensions, there's a reason. It has to do with the laws of the road. 8.5 feet wide is the legal limit for not being an oversized load. So like the Clever S you see out there, if you're making a smaller unit, you generally make it 8.5 wide. A lot of these homes back here are 8.5 wide because you can transport them without any special permits. 12 feet wide in most of the US and most of California, you can transport with permits. It's an oversized load, but you don't need a follow vehicle. So that obviously saves a lot of cost because you've got one truck going, not two. And you can kind of transport it anytime. So we've transported, I mentioned the unit in Maine and Florida. We just said those are both 12 feet wide. So you can drive 12 feet wide, clear across the country. It is wide. You do need to be a CDL. I mean, you need to be a commercial driver's license, but we do them with F-250s, F-350s. You don't need a big truck. And then 15 feet wide is like the single wides, like your manufactured housing, which is not really a tiny home, but just to mention that, it's your HUD home or trailer homes. Those are generally 15. That's 15 is kind of your limit with follow vehicles. So that's the width. On the height, the other thing that comes out is height. So 14 feet high, 13.5, 14 is the legal limit for height. That's kind of what a truck does. You can go higher. Once you go higher, again, you need permits. And then you need to start being careful about where you're driving because you start hitting overpass limits. So we always do under 14.5. So that way we never worry about hitting an overpass. And generally the permits are drivers. If you're trying to hire a commercial driver to move your home, they charge a much higher premium for over height than for over width. Usually for kind of obvious reasons, because there's a liability for going high is danger. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question.
For transporting over 12 feet wide, is that expensive?
The permits are not, but you have to have a follow car. And so it's not super expensive, but it starts adding. We've found that certainly, 15 feet is nice and wide. With 12 feet, we can get a really comfortable home if it's designed well. And so a lot of people think our 12 foot is 15 foot wide just because of the high ceilings, the kind of design aesthetic, and it saves a lot of cost on transport. Yeah, but it's a good question. Yeah. Sorry, can you say that again? Yeah. Yeah. The question was, if you wanted to have a tiny home that did not have a loft, what size? So we actually do not build homes with lofts. We only build ground floor homes. I mean, there's different homes with different designs. So we only do ground floor. So we have an 8.5 by 26. It's the unit that's out there that, again, like a lot of people live in that home, and, has a Murphy bed, and that works totally fine. Lofts are great from one perspective because they add square footage without making the home bigger, right? But you do have to think about what there's a trade-off with you're going to be sleeping in an area that you can't stand up in often, right? Are you okay with that or not? And then whatever below it, it's also going to have a low ceiling height, right? And so this is just our design aesthetic and the way we go. We like having tall ceilings because tall ceilings make the home feel bigger. And we can use Murphy beds and stuff like that. But yeah, we do like 8.5 by 26 with no loft. Obviously, we also do it, 400 square foot one without a loft. It's a 1 bedroom, but it works really well. Yeah, it's a good question. Other questions, other things I can talk about here. Yeah. The question was, are the slides on our website? We're probably going to post a video of this, but if you email us hello@clevertinyhomes.com, we can send you the slides. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I guess I have a question. Can you just buy land and put your tiny house? Is that permitted?
Can you just buy land and put your tiny house? That's the $1 million question. The answer, it highly depends, right? Can you buy land in like Sacramento City and put a tiny home? No, right? Someone's going to complain. It's not legal. It has to be permanent, right? Can you buy land in the middle of nowhere in Texas? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we have a lot of customers who did that, right? Can you buy land in Placer County and put a tiny home? Yes, because you can permit it. You can just do it unpermanent and not permanent. So there's a legal pathway, which is where do they allow it and not. There's the more hackish pathway, which is where is someone going to care and not. Does that make sense? And you got to kind of balance that. We've shipped a lot of off-grid homes, homes that are totally off-grid, and they go to someone who has 5 acres in a more rural areas. Mostly they're not permitting it. Mostly no one cares. It's there, and that's great. But you definitely can't take like a city lot and put it without permit it. In West Sacramento, again, you can put a tiny home and permit it as a primary, right? By the way, one of the wonderful people who passed the West Sacramento law is standing back there. So West Sacramento, you can. Placer, you can. But so it really depends on where you are. Yeah. We wish there was more places. We're pushing as an industry to have more places that can do that. But yeah.
Maybe anticipated where crack downs on hand house and land the property deeds. It's all grid off the paper.
Are there crackdowns on it?
Is there any word of information ordinances about payment tax workers like corporations?
So, I don't want to give you legal advice here. Generally, if first of all, if it's permitted, generally the way housing law works in the U.S. is once something's permitted, they can't go back and say no, now it's not allowed. That's the good news, right? If you put something that's not permanent on land and then they change the law, could they go after you? Usually they'll have some kind of amnesty program or some kind of way to do that. But again, there's a judgment call. I'll give you an example. We had a customer who we found out later was going to put the home in a very NIMBY, not in my backyard area of greater LA area. This is a place where people don't want more building. They put it there. We're like, hey, you're gonna have trouble. And they're like, no, I don't think we will. We're like, no, I promise you, you're gonna have trouble, right? Everyone doesn't want housing here. And they got away with it for a year. And then the neighbor, complained, and the city came out and said this isn't allowed. And it wasn't. We told them that.
On a country road, you're probably not.
I'm not going to give you official advice. I will tell you there's over 100 of our homes off on a country road somewhere without permits, and they're doing okay. That's in the last year. So yeah.
Price range of your 8.5 by 26, just the price range.
Yeah, our company, and this isn't to promote our company, so I don't want to promote too much, but we have a 8.5 by 26, very high quality construction. That's right around $80,000. Yeah. That's kind of our thing. Yeah.
Are these tiny homes on wheels meant to be moved or taken multiple times?
Are they meant to be multiple times? That's a good question. They are definitely not designed to be travel trailers. So you're not going to go RVing with them. They're heavy. It takes a lot of gas to move them. But, if they're built well, yeah, they're certainly a type of housing that can be relocated relatively easily, right? So we have a number of customers that are kind of traveling nurse, right? So they're putting it in one location and then they're kind of expecting a few years to move it somewhere else. Things like that. Fire victims is another kind of one that it falls into. Yeah.
So are you removing wheels typically? Do you think it's gonna be there a while, or is that not?
We can remove wheels, yeah, or we can put on foundation, obviously, permanently,
Yeah, okay, so.
or skirt it, yeah. It really depends. Yeah,
When they're constructed or, okay, general construction nails and whatnot.
yeah.
When you get them screws and glue and things like that, how is it keep things so rigid so that they don't?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everyone builds a little differently. I can talk about how we do it. You know, we do standard construction, right? So we do, I mean, ours are built to the International Residential Code, 2x4, shear walls, all of that with nails. But I know where you're going with that. So there are a few things that we do differently, right? One is, you know, we make sure that it's engineered for basically high earthquakes and high winds, because when they're going down the road, you know, it's if you, I mean, I've been in one that's going on. You're basically in an earthquake and in a home. It's actually an interesting question because we often get customers who are like, oh, you know, I'm in you know, North Carolina, or I'm in California where it's earthquakes. Will it withstand an earthquake? Yeah, because we get to send it for like 3 days in a nonstop earthquake. By the time it's got you, it's gone the earthquake. Now you do have to be careful that nails don't come out and stuff like that, right? So hurricane ties we use, right? This is how we do it. Drywall, we glue the drywall as well as screw it. So drywall, if you just screw in drywall, it will shake loose and come loose. So we glue drywall. We also put a coating on the drywall, fiberglass on top of the drywall to stop it from cracking. There's a lot of things that I would say are really like high quality construction details that allow it to withstand the kind of abuse it gets.
Hurricane proof.
Hurricane proof, yeah, for sure. Again, not everyone does it, but that's how we do it, and we're able to ship, you know, nationwide as a result of that. Yeah.
So then what's recommended for continuing education about climate change?
On the ordinance, join the Tiny House Industry Association. Join the Tiny House Industry Association. Yeah. We're going to be doing a lot around that there. Cool. Any other questions? I'm happy to also answer it at our booth at Clever Tiny Homes, but anything else I can talk about? Yeah.
Is the extreme material if you guys want to use in the interior of the home, because it might crack or break them or
Well, if you're doing drywall, you have to be very, very thoughtful. We do drywall, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you do it. That's certainly one. Again, it's all you need to make sure your shear walls are good enough. Your hurricane strapping is good enough. You know, it's you just have to think about the fact that it's going to go through an earthquake and a hurricane to get there. And so how do you build around that? Yeah. How do you take stuff up? Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Hopefully that was useful. Appreciate your time.